Ooh, that looks tasty. Welcome, folks. Today, the Hungry Gamer is back with another interview, and today I am joined by Dr. Steve Finn of Dr. Finn's Games and Ed Baraf of Pencil-First Games. And these two have teamed up many times for Pencil-First Games. And of course, Dr. Finn also has his own publishing and a bunch of his own games that he puts out. And the first question I think everyone has, Dr. Finn, is, are you actually a doctor? What are you a doctor of?
I am a doctor. I have a PhD in philosophy, and I'm a philosophy professor. The use of the name doctor was almost a joke, but I've stuck, and I'm good. I'm good
He's
with it.
also a world-class ultimate frisbee player and coach.
Oh.
So all sorts of craziness with Steve.
All sorts of stuff.
So when are we getting the ultimate frisbee game?
You know, I made one a long time ago when I was making basically hand versions of my own games. I was never happy with it though, so I didn't pursue it too much. Also,
it didn't capture
it didn't capture it. I've had a hard time actually because I wanted to make a game that really kind of captured Ultimate, and it was hard. And I kind of gave up. Instead, it was just you assembled a team of good players, and so it was a drafting kind of game. But it wasn't actually playing the game. It was just drafting a team of good Ultimate players.
So and then you can have hear that we'll have our first Dr. Finn's miniatures skirmish game coming soon of Ultimate Frisbee. Is that what I'm taking from this?
No, I think what you're taking is probably it's a very long time before anything comes out of my head.
Well, and you have to make the game where every player gets to be the ump, right? Like while they're playing.
Yeah, so you don't know anything about Ultimate, right? Oh well, yes, everyone, because there are no umps, there are no referees, right? Yes, true.
Anyway, but
so we are here to talk about their latest collaboration, which is hitting Kickstarter in a week or so from the airing of this video, not the recording of this video. And their new team
March 23rd, by the way, just to say it. That's the date.
March 23rd. You can check it. It's right there, everybody. March 23rd. But their latest one is Floriferous. And if you are like me, you're thinking, didn't they already do Herbaceous? The answer to that is yes, and we're going to talk about that. But first, Ed had a story that he posted on his channel the other day about how this game came to be. And so, Ed, how did this happen? Where did you start? Where did you end up? And then we're going to get the real-time response of Dr. Finn and how he felt about this.
Well, I'll try to do the condensed version. Obviously, or as you've mentioned, the two of us have worked together on a variety of titles, many of which started with artwork from Beth Sobel. So the Herbaceous, the original thing we worked on together, she had created a print and play for Bonanza of herbs, which I thought was amazing, and sort of was like, is this in a game? And she was like, well, it's a reskin. And I approached her about saying, hey, if we made a new game that was like an original game, what do you think? And she was on board. I was initially designing it. I was struggling, connected with Steve. I wanted to make it a solo. He's like, I don't do solo, I do multiplayer. And anyway, Herbaceous came together and was great. And from there, we actually continued to work in this pattern with Beth, where we'd start with like, what's an area of art you like would love to work in, and then sort of using that as the parameters and the scope, the breadbox for the game design, which isn't exactly how Steve always does it, but has worked out really well for these titles. And then we did the Whatnot Cabinet in the same fashion after Sunset Over Water and Sprouts. And the Whatnot Cabinet actually is going to backers now. It was the last title we all did as a group with Beth. And then we were doing other things. We were approached by a group to make like a cooperative game that Steve and I went down a path on for probably longer than we should have, but it's fine. For some time, it didn't work out. And then we didn't have much going on, and I have a game called Legendary Creatures that I've been trying to make a sort of lighter weight version of. And I don't know, Steve maybe had some cycles and started messing around with it and building it out. So he did his process. This moved into COVID. We were playing on Tabletopia, and iterating on this slimmed, lighter weight Legendary Creatures. It was in a castle, different dynamics, different creatures you were collecting, all the type of stuff you're going through, with a game design. And it was similar in that it didn't have a piece of art to start with, but it basically had a brief. It was like, hey, Steve, this game, these basic parameters, this is what we're going for. See what you like. And so we were playing and doing it, and then I'd give Steve feedback, adjust, feedback, adjust. That's not terribly different than our dynamic. I don't think. Maybe Steve feels that way, but we just it just wasn't coming together in a way I think either of us was really thrilled with. And but there were these elements to it that were fantastic, like the really simple mechanic of the sort of set collection, but set collection based on you're picking the set or you're picking the scoring component, which is the sort of heart of Floriferous, which we can talk about more later, was great. And we, sort of like, hey, like, what if we just strip out all this other stuff and just make a game about this element of the mechanic? Now, again, I don't remember the exact phrasing, but Steve said something like, well, if you did all that, this wouldn't be your brief. Like, this no longer makes sense for legendary creature. It'd be much more like the weight of an herbaceous. And I was like, all right, that doesn't bother me. Let's just do that. And so, and he agreed. So it couldn't have been that bad. And so we drove, and then we had to work on it more, but got to a really nice place with Floriferous, the game design, and then actually went through a process moving on the art side because Beth wasn't available from a timing perspective. And so ultimately we worked with Clementine Campardu to do the watercolor art, which is fantastic as well. So that was like a whole nother part of the story, but that's the short version.
And so Steve, will kind of toss it over to you. Now, the way that sounds is it was like, oh, no, that's fine. I don't need this game. It's no big deal. I just got another one. What's the real scoop? Because I know there was a moment of like, what?
No, I think Ed has got it right, and I think Ed knows me well enough now after working with me that I try all sorts of stuff. I mean, I'll just go in all different directions and make a radical change, drop this whole part off. But I mean, the way that I would describe this story is it's basically it's the same, but I'll just say it's slightly different. It's just from a different angle. Would be Ed basically said to me, I want a game with a lot of meeples. I just want a ton of meeples. So my thing was, I'm going to make a set collection game with meeples. And so I was struggling to find a way that we would pick the meeples, get the different kind of meeples because they have different shapes. And so I was like, how do we get them? Like, because you can't draw meeples from a bag if you know what the shapes feel like, because you know what that is. So I had this whole thing, like a whole board. The meeples were going to get put on the board, and then you're moving around to pick them all up. And Ed's basically right. It was like this core mechanic of going the turn order, who's going to pick up, what you're going to pick up, when you go, when you move, and what kinds of things you're going to get was the most interesting part of the game. But it turned out that you didn't need any meeples. Like there was no reason to have meeples. You're just cards. And so I was like, Ed, it's just like, it's not working with the meeples. I can't do this. Okay. And so we ended up just stripping away 90% of this game and saying, let's just look at this part.
And how many
I was right.
iterations were you in to the meeple game at that point when I was like, okay, no, I'm done with it?
It's hard for me to count. I mean, I probably went through like 3 or 4 like general ideas. The way I do it would be like I'll throw out stuff like, all right, what's the main thing? Am I going to move around a board? Is there going to be one fixed board? Is there going to be a replacement every round? How far in the future can you see? It began with like this big track that all the meeples were laid out, and just imagine like a snakes and ladders kind of track where you could like move as far as you wanted to go get the meeple that you wanted. But as you were going, you could also get scoring cards. So it was like I'm picking up meeples and I'm picking up scoring cards. And so what ended up happening was we just got rid of the meeples and just said you're picking up cards, and then you're picking up scoring cards that interact with the other cards. And so it probably just had 2 or 3 basic ideas where I went through, how am I going to get the meeples on the board? Am I going to have maybe it's rounds that you pull out certain meeples, like pull out 10 meeples every round, and there's some mechanism for picking them, or are they all going to be laid out? Or are they even going to be laid out? Is there another way that I can
Right,
get the meeples?
and
You know,
different constructions of the road, and the way that they're put together.
together,
I mean,
right?
I think what's important, two important concepts to understand about Dr. Finn here. One is Steve's prolific, right? Like he does a lot of game design work and a lot of, he's been doing it for many decades, and
Two,
2 decades,
not
Oh,
almost 2 decades.
almost 2 decades, and but both for Dr. Finn's games as well as other publishers, not just Pencil First Games, and so with that, I think it comes a lot of bits. One bit is what Steve was just describing, which is like a willingness to like shift and change. Like it's not a baby in the context of like somebody's first game or second game, right? Um, so a lot of it's about like, hey, okay, well, here's some ideas. Let's go in this direction. We can do this thing. And then also, I think comes with a lot of experience in terms of the willingness to like change and alter and edit. There are a lot of designers, like you have different designers in different ways, but some like will never overhaul something. They'll like just continue to like tweak it or adjust it or add something or subtract it, but they won't be like this. And then you have a lot of designers who are like, you're over here and you have something that's like near perfect, and then they're like, all right, I'm going to spin over here. You're like, no, it was great, it just was one. And but I think with the amount of experience and sort of range that Steve has, conversations like this really aren't that bad. I mean, it could be fun, but if it was more dramatic, but I think it works out. And I also think that just in the version where it's a little bit more of a brief, like in the version where it, this isn't like a design that he was working on that he was pitching in the same way. He might pitch something to another publisher where he's like, hey, here's the game I want to make, or here's the design. This was more like me saying, here's a thing I'm looking for, and he was like, I'll take a stab at putting that together, and then we sort of worked through that as we were moving through the process. I think, and again, without getting into the difficulties, I feel like there was all like it was interesting in that it was on the back of that other project that was like running down
Right.
the cooperative track. But the cool part was once we agreed and we said, hey, let's do this Floriferous, then it was quick, right? Then it
Yeah,
was,
just fell
hey,
into place.
let's streamline all this out. Is that the right kind of storing? Is that the right number of cards? But at the amount of time there was much quicker to like get to a point where we were both really happy, and then do more play testing and stuff like that to sort of have the center of Floriferous.
and so moving into talking more about Floriferous, because that's why I assume most people are watching this right now. So, what is the big difference between herbaceous and floriferous? Because if you're playing with those names, so very clearly you want, I assume, I have herbaceous, I definitely have to have floriferous. But now that question is, I have herbaceous, why do I need floriferous?
Uh, that's a good question. I might think about it a little slightly different than you're saying it. What I would say is, what's similar about them? Well, what's similar is that they're accessible, light, 20-minute games, which are really appealing visually, relaxing, soft game experiences that really appeal to a wide range of players and can be played easily with different groups of people casually, right? So it's the reason we are aligned it so closely with the herbaceous line isn't that it's mechanically a one-to-one with herbaceous, but really sits in that same weight and family with um, with that other product. Herbaceous sprouts mechanically is much more of a direct extension of some of the concepts from herbaceous than adding in dice and adding some more more stuff going on. But it got a little heavier. Floriferous is really just, you have this beautiful flowers, you create a garden, and then you're moving through the garden, collecting flowers or collecting cards that create different types of set collections, right? So I have yellow daisies and mums and tulips, and maybe there's a card that gives you points for all the red cards, points for different flowers. There are little bugs, some bug points, so, which is in contrast to, I guess, herbaceous, which is more of a push your luck game where you're doing set collect. I mean, they both have set collection, so that's another similarity. But it mechanically, it's very, very different. Like the reason you should get floriferous if you like herbaceous is because if you like herbaceous, you'll love floriferous, right? Because the person who plays those games should really it's the same, if it's the same resonance, right? It should be the same. If I hit the same thing, it makes the same beautiful sound, even though it's a totally different object. I don't know, Steve, how do you want to phrase
Well, I mean, why would someone need another game?
it?
Really, I mean, it's for the same reason that everybody always keeps doing new things. Anybody, I mean, I think Herbaceous is great, but if I played it 1,000 times, I'd probably be bored of it. I mean, if I played my favorite game, 1,000 times, I'd get bored. No matter what games we play, we're always looking for new experiences, right? And so obviously, Floriferous and Herbaceous are different games, as Ed was saying, mechanically. But I think he put it right, is to say people who like this kind of game, like the kinds of games we design together, will probably like this. What does it have? Well, in Similar World, it also has pretty artwork. It looks good on the table, but he said it has a short playing time. It's very easy to understand. But like what I think most of my games, which I hope, is that they give you new and interesting decisions, and they challenge you to think in a short amount of time, even though it's a light game. Like so, even a heavier gamer will still be challenged by it. It's not a it's not it's not super heavy by any means, but like many of the games that we make, it's not devoid of decisions. 20 minutes of packed thinkiness, where it's like, oh, should I do this? Should I do that? What should I do? And and then that's really it. So people people always need new games. If you're a game player, you will get bored with all the games that you play. It's very rare to me that I meet anybody who just like will play the same game over and over again. Although we all know at least one or two people, I guess, right?
Yeah, well,
I don't have many people like that. The people I am surrounded with always like to play new games. And what you like is you realize there's a style of game that you like.
right.
And so this fits into that style. And, like some people like 2 hour long games. I'm
And
not
I
going to
think,
sit play a 2 hour game. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. And I think for those who are familiar with the products we've done together, it sits in an interesting place. I think it sits somewhere between Herbaceous and Sunset Over Water.
Of water. That's exactly what I was going to say. Yes.
And in terms of sort of things going on and complexities, in some ways, it's actually, all you're doing on your turn is picking a card in a row and picking it up. So in some ways, that actual dynamics is on the quicker side, but then it has some of the different score types in a few more places than Herbaceous, which just has your scoring pots.
I
at the
think in
bottom.
Herbaceous, if I've been telling someone how to play that, the thing that always, I can tell everyone knows what set collection is. We know what that is. But the thing that I always will single out that makes the decision space interesting for me is that I'm going to say you cut, I choose. It's not right, but you have the two in that decision. I'm going to keep this just for me, and you might take this one for me later. That's the putting it into the garden, the public garden.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that sticks out to me, which I think makes that game particularly interesting. It takes set collection and it has just a little bit of a twist to make it interesting. And I went, okay, yeah, I'm going to play that one. So, what is it in Floriferous? Well, what is that mechanic in Floriferous that's like, okay, this is not just set collection. This is why this is interesting.
But let me just describe quickly what Floriferous as a game is, because I've sort of said it, but I haven't maybe said it explicitly. So in Floriferous, you are going to lay out a very pretty box. You are going to lay out. It was right the first time. Sorry. Right. You are going to lay out. You're going to deal out a garden, which is a space which will be rows or columns of garden cards. And most of those are going to be flowers of different colors and types, some of which have bugs, some of which don't. At the bottom of that space, there are also going to be these desire cards, which are, sort of things you're looking for, things you like red flowers or tulips or bees. And as a player, on the left side of the garden, everyone lines up with their pawns. It's 1 to 4 players. There's some special solo rules, but you're going to say this is a 4-player game. We're going to have 4 pawns lined up, and you're going to be going into a column of 5 choices. So the player who's at the top goes first. So what you're doing is you're going to go into the next space into that column and pick what you want. Oh, I want the red tulip. I want this. I want that scoring card. And there's some other bonus cards in there. I want that statue. and you pick it and you take the card. What then everyone goes, and what's happening though is as people are picking in the column, they're not only picking the card they're going to keep, but they're also picking turn order, right? Because the person at the top is always going to go first. So there's a dynamic where you're looking at and thinking about how badly do I want what's in front of me versus maybe how badly do I want the choice in the next round, right? So in the next column. And so you're juggling how much do I want to go first versus how much do I want this card versus how much do I maybe want this set collection card. Like maybe there's a card that says daisies. I don't have any daisies, but I can see the garden that has 5 columns, and I could see like 3 daisies along the way. And I could say, well, maybe I'll get this daisy card and then pick up those other ones. But then now I really care about the order I go in so somebody else doesn't get it. And then basically what's really nice is it's not like you're looking at every single card in the deck. You sort of have this sort of five round preview where you run through 5 times of this decision, and then you clear out any card that isn't taken, and then you redeal and go back, and then you do that for 3 days. So with that description, what the magic is the junction or nexus of picking up something I want but is worth nothing, picking up something that's worth something but requires that other thing, or do I want agency on subsequent turns? That none of those concepts are all that crazy. Like they all exist, but what I think makes it stand out and feel special is it's done in such a light way that it carries this sort of really fast, rapid play smoothness of all, like a lot of Steve's stuff, while giving you those interesting moments and tons of interesting, like, oh no, do I go left or right here? Left is this decision, and I'm just going to have consequences for the rest of this game. Right is going to have these consequences. And even though it's 20 minutes, I felt like that decision at that juncture mattered, and every turn feels like it matters in a good way. Is how I would answer that question. Steve?
I mean, I think though it's packing a lot of decisions in a short amount of time, because basically there's 15 turns, and on your turn you're just picking up a card. That's it. You're going to get 15 cards in the game. So like on the face of it, it just seems, oh, this seems like a really easy game. But each one of those cards that you have to decide, because if you go first, there's 5 cards, and you have to decide, which of these 5 cards do I want? Do I want to take the scoring cards? So like the vast majority of the cards or the garden cards, there's only 5 scoring cards put out per round. So there's 15 scoring cards that you could pick up during the game. And so you have to find this balance. Like, how many cards do I want to get that will help me score with the scoring cards I've already picked up? Or do I want to keep picking up scoring cards to kind of prevent other people from getting those scoring cards? So it's a very simple game, but it has a lot of interesting decisions about, and then you're also trying to guess what other people are going to do. So I like that aspect of it as well. Like if I go first this round, in the next round I get to go first again. But if I go third now, what will Ed do in the next round?
Probably something horrible.
Will he leave a card there that I want, or will he try to take it from me knowing that I really want it?
Yeah,
so there's a little bit of that too that happens.
Yeah, and that is a little. It's not as central as it is in Herbaceous, but there's that similar vibe in that you're hoping that somebody doesn't do something between.
Well, and what I'm hearing is it's a lot of times in mini set collection games, it can feel a little multiplayer solitaire, but what it sounds like is that is adding some, I'll say, indirect player interaction. I mean, I'm not going after you necessarily, but I could go after you because I can see that you have that daisy scoring card. I'm going to go pick up all these daisies if I want.
Well, we have that, but there are some direct interaction here, because there's sometimes a scoring card could be beneficial for both of us. There's also these there's statues, right? Whoever gets the most statues at the end will score amount of points. And there's also these gemstones? What is it that we ended up on?
The arrangements, you mean?
No, the little things that you put on the cards.
Oh, they're just stones, like
Yeah, the
cardboard.
stones, right.
Yeah.
So, you can also be picking up these stones along the way, and the person who gets the most stones will also get some benefit. So there's a little bit of an interaction there as well. But yeah, so I wouldn't say this is like a solitary game at all. That we're all a multiplayer solitaire.
Yeah, it's yeah. What's really nice about it is it's very the other players are very relevant to you, and the decisions they make are very relevant to you. So like there are a lot of great games where you have this combination of score types and set collection. Like that's not but where ultimately it starts feeling like we're all just taking turns and focusing on our board in front of us or what we're doing, and we're not really centrally focused on the decisions everyone's making. Like I don't really have to pay attention to other players to know what I'm doing. Where in this case it has that nice blend where you do. Again, it doesn't have any action cards where you're like steal a card from another player, right? It isn't that kind of interaction, but there's definitely like, oh, that arrangement card gives a bonus for somebody who has a bee, a mum, and an orange flower. I have all three of those, but oh no, Steve has all three of those too. Maybe I'm just gonna like take this lily I don't really care about in order to get the advantage in the next round. And then there's another player, my Ethan, who was like, "Why did you just take that lily? Like I did not predict you were going to take that lily. I wanted that lily." So
Poor Ethan never knows what's going on.
yeah, well, no, he's more typically because I play a lot with the family because we live in the same zone.
Oh, is Ethan one of your children?
Yeah, Ethan's my kid.
Oh.
But he's more typical to take revenge and it's sort of like get off of suboptimal play to be a little bit more dramatic. But no, and so I think it works, and we put a lot. I put a lot of time, and the team puts a lot of time into making it all look and feel good, right? So you have the pawns that you're moving around, and the art is beautiful. And then, as Steve mentioned, there are a few different scoring types. One of which are these bounty cards, which are just looking for a different type of set, and you have these really gorgeous. You'll see it when you open the box. These really gorgeous flower tokens that have a print on them that you put, and so it just makes for a really, nice experience. Setting it up and playing it out. It's a couple different decks of cards, and you deal them out. So again, it's the type of game that is play it after dinner. Play it before you play a bunch of other games. Pull it out to play with new gamers who haven't played before. It really does fit. I think what has been really the lasting value on Herbaceous, that kind of zone.
And what you're describing, I'll flatter Steve a little bit, is I think perhaps the mastery of Dr. Finn's games is they are quick and simple. They do a few things, but the decision space within them is always very, very deep. I haven't played all of Dr. Finn's games because I don't know who has that much time, right?
Why am I having this interview? Come on.
But each of the ones that I've played, being Herbaceous and School of Sorcery and Mining Colony and the one that I'm forgetting now.
Manga Parbat?
No, I haven't played that one yet.
Oh, that's a great one.
But all of them, it's one thing that you're focused on, but the decision space within it is very, very deep in a very fast game, and that seems to be kind of the core of what he does, and then especially what you guys do when you team up and make magic, make flowers. I guess it should be.
Flowers.
So the last question I'm going to throw out there is, which one of you wins more at Floriferous? Yeah.
Do you know the answer to that, Steve?
No, I don't even know. I don't even know if we score.
Yeah. I think. I mean, it's a fine question. But sometimes he wins when he remembers rules halfway through.
Yes.
That he was trying to teach me. I think for the most part, he runs play testing, I run play testing. Those are more like looking at and thinking about the player experience. When we play together, it's typically more about thinking and playing through the game experience that he's put together. So we might stop halfway through and reset something. We might be playing 4 players with 2 players, right? There's all sorts of different. Oh, hey, that was okay, but what if we did this or what if we did that? Like one of the things that we spent a lot of time working through and playing together was just it's pretty straightforward and simple, but there's unique setup based on player count. The amount of cards you deal is different, but then also we ended up adjusting some of the stones and a few other things, and a lot of that sort of came from thinking through what, like, just trying it, going into it, switching it, discussing it. So I think when we're in that mode, I'm not really, we're not competitive. It's funny too because like when I play games with Keith Mateka, they're different games. Like when you play Skull Hollow or Mall Peak or whatever, like there's very much like who won the last time. But I'm not with Steve. I couldn't even tell you.
Yeah, no, I have no idea. I mean, like, because I don't even know. Like, I think if we count points, it's just to see like, are the numbers adding up right? It's not like who won. It's more like, was that a close game? Was it not a close game?
Right.
Do these values make sense? Had like, if this scorecard was worth that, you would have won. Should you have, did you deserve to win? Should we change that card? And that would be the kind of thing that happens when we
Yeah,
play together.
it would be interesting, and I didn't come prepared, but it would be interesting. The interesting question here would be how many calls towards the end of the project did Steve push hard on or Ed push hard on that turned out to be the right or the wrong decision ultimately. Like an example is an example with Floriferous. Stone, you haven't played yet, but you're amongst other things, you're collecting stones. Stones can get you the cup of tea at the end of the game, which is like a hallmark of some of these titles. But then for every 2 stones, you get a point. Steve's preference, which isn't in the game, is that you have half points. So like if I get 5 stones, you get 2.5 points. I feel like for these weight games, like getting into half points, just round. I'm more of the rounding guy. You round up or you round down, and everyone lives with it. It was interesting. I had a game just yesterday. We both ended with 40 points, and then we went to the tiebreaker. But if we had gone by stones, it would have been different. So it's really interesting. So there have been a number of those types of calls that we've had where sometimes Steve he's like, this is the right way to do it. We just do it. Sometimes I'm like, let's go this way. That I think are really interesting as you get into the nitty gritty. But those are the ones that we like. I think look at more. We don't really sit and think about who's won which game or not. I think so much. Well, let me ask you: Are you a half pointer or a rounder? Which do you prefer?
Probably. Well, I'm gonna go. Who am I playing with? If I'm playing with my wife, we are rounding and going for it. Some of my other friends, like they would be down to go into like the 0.2s or whatever. But for me, if we're getting more complex than a half point, that's too much. In general, I'd probably just round or just change the scale.
Right.
Easy math. We're not all doctors here, Dr.
Yeah.
Finn.
Well, yeah, he's super.
I'm not. It's not philosophy. I'm math.
Well, you're pretty good at math.
I'm not that kind of doctor. I swear.
Yes.
Yeah, but no, and look, it's been a real. We've worked on now. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So Floriferous is our 5th project, right?
Yeah.
And certainly, we've talked about things along the way, some of which didn't work out, but it's been a real pleasure working together, and I think we have some similar sensibilities, but some different sensibilities, and I also think we both have a really nice willingness to, go in different directions, try other things. Like it's very, it's about, for lack of a better term, finding the fun, getting to the great game, right? Like it's not about whether it was the 5th thing to get there or the first thing. It's just about the experience. So I think we are good in that regard. And so I hopefully make some more games.
Oh yeah.
So obviously, coming very soon, we have from both of you, Floriferous coming, and I'll just leave it with, if you're allowed to say yet, I guess Ed can say whatever. You can both say whatever you want because it's your companies, right? But what is next after that for each of you, if you can say, or if you have enough info? We'll start with Dr. Finn because Ed's thinking hard.
Sure. Well, for me, it's easy. I have, I just wrapped up, or I'm wrapping up a Kickstarter now, which was my 4 games for 2021. But I'm now finishing the 4 games for 2022. and I'm super excited about those. They're going to be kickstarted during the summer, hopefully this time early summer, so that if in the fingers crossed, if PAX Unplugged happens, that I could have some games for that convention. I know it's with COVID,
Yeah, it's
it's
tough.
still 50-50, but who knows? Who knows what's going to
Can you
happen?
drop those titles for us of what
Yeah,
those
I'd be
4 games
happy
are?
to. So, very quickly, there's The Feds, which is kind of a remake of an earlier game called Gun Runners, but it's takes it in a different direction. Then I have a game called Alpujarras, which is about Moorish Spain, about fruit farmers in Moorish Spain. Middle like the year 1900 AD, 1000, something like that. Then I have the Little Flower Shop dice game, so a dice version of my Little Flower Shop game. And then the last one is a new game called The Fisheries of Gloucester. It's going to be a 2-player game about 19th century New England fishing. Head to head, getting out on your boat, rushing out to grab the fish, and before your opponent gets out there.
So it's like that Monty Python sketch where you hit each other with fish. Is that
Well, if it devolves into that, then it's more serious than that.
all right, and Ed, how about you?
Yeah, well, on Pencil First game side, there's always a lot in motion. I think the big things are obviously Floriferous is first up, as well as before that is actually happening, delivering the Whatnot cabinet, which is exciting. We then have an expansion to the 100 Tory called Diverging Paths, which is with Scott Caputo. The interesting thing that we're doing at the same time is there's a type of Japanese game or cards called Hanafuda cards, which were actually like the first thing Nintendo printed. And there you can play different types of games. It's like a Japanese poker deck that you can play a bunch of different games with. And I've always been enthralled with it, and apparently Vincent Dutrait, who does that art, is as well. So it's sort of going to be a combo Kickstarter, but we're going to do like an original Hanafuda deck, which is just like a fun side thing. And then the other big title this year is Mal Peak, which is the standalone sequel to Skull Hollow with Keith Mateka. Those are probably the major Kickstarters of the year, and then there's always other little things going on. Steve and I continue to talk about fun things to do with Herbaceous. We did the Herbaceous Pocket Edition. Been experimenting with whether or not Sunset Over Water Pocket Edition works. I think it will, but figuring that out. So, just a nice combination of different games and genres we're working with, great designers and artists and stuff.
Great. Well, thank you guys for taking the time, and everybody down in the description, you will find links to everything Dr. Finn and everything Pencil First you can possibly imagine. And make sure you check out Floriferous on launch, and I will have a link down in the description how to get a reminder about that as well. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Everybody, thank you for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.